do you access the third eye, or the Ajna chakra? Well, first off, you need to know that your ass probably doesn't want to access the third eye, because it'd be really fucking bad for you. But the New Age movement has totally bastardized Tantra and Yoga. And we've come to this situation now where there's this bias towards ideas or practices that these motherfuckers haven't really actually touched on. They only think about these things in terms of books by popular gurus coming out of India, or fucking soccer moms in Silicon Valley or some shit like that. Anyway, the third eye, or the Ajna chakra, is the bridge between the mind at the Vishuddhi and spirit at the Sahasrara. Okay? And it is the pathway of exploring what I call subtle space. So, to access the third eye, you can employ a lot of practices that are incorporated into Vyagra Yoga, or you can have a natural link to the third eye if you are rooted in the Ajna chakra. The doctrine of rooted consciousness, which states that everyone has a rooted point of consciousness that is associated with one of the 7 traditional chakras of Tantra, shows that certain individuals are naturally rooted at the third eye. And these individuals exist in constant connection with subtle space, or the place between mind and pure spirit, the place between the walls. So, this place, subtle space, is an area where we can form intellectual concepts surrounding interaction with spirit. And this is the point of inner vision. Also, it is the point at which you may begin to experience what most people would consider to be traditional psychic phenomenon. So for example, being able to hear the thoughts of other people, being able to see spirits, being able to communicate with the dead. These are all things that are associated with the third eye. Now, I said most of you wouldn't want to open the third eye, and I fucking mean it, because being in the third eye is not this blissful, peaceful, tranquil experience for most people. For most people, it creates a feeling of intense paranoia, and you'll start to have experiences which are very difficult to understand in a culture that emphasizes things like psychology and vulgar science to explain every interaction that we have with the cosmos. There are elements of the cosmos that exist outside of the matrix of vulgar science and modern psychology. And when you interact with subtle space, what you're doing is you are opening up channels of communication with things that are interdimensional. When you access these other planes of existence, these other dimensions, you open yourself up to interaction with demons, angels, inhuman spirits of all sorts, deities, the dead. And while some of these interactions can be very peaceful and can be blissful experiences, more often than not, if you are not properly trained in how to traverse subtle space, you're going to be a nice piece of meat for some malicious entity that wants to fuck with you royally. So you've got to be sure before you access that point that you have the ability to navigate it. Now, individuals who are rooted within the Ajna, they grow up with a connection to subtle space. And so through just the necessity of survival, they learn how to navigate that space. Most of them learn how to shut off those pathways. They might have some experiences like they'll see spirits and things like that, but very early on, they try to create barriers that you can create in order to protect themselves from those interactions. If they don't do this and they don't learn how to properly interact with these entities, they will probably become schizophrenic. Schizophrenia is just maladjustment at the third eye. That's all it is. It's not some psychological disease. It's an aspect of consciousness that is deeply misunderstood by modern psychology. If you access the third eye, which you can do through certain yogic practices, and you're not prepared to do it, you might become schizophrenic. The impact of the uninitiated interacting with the third eye is full access of total cosmic horror. H.P. Lovecraft was someone who was rooted in the ajna, and he interacted with entities, interdimensional entities, that are beyond the scope of what is considered to be within the grasp of science. Now, if you grow up in a culture that doesn't recognize the legitimacy of these experiences, you will be left to navigate subtle space with no help. You will be deeply misunderstood. And this is where the confusion arises over the nature of these interactions with interdimensional beings. Possession is a very real thing. You can be possessed by demons, and you can also be possessed by angels. And this possession can lead to very, very intense outcomes. I mean, just as intense as something like the Exorcist films. Now, that kind of possession is extremely rare, but it does happen. And angelic possession, this is something that can occur. Just because you're being possessed by an angelic spirit doesn't mean that it's going to be this peaceful, tranquil experience. In fact, possession by the angelic can be extremely brutal, and it can lead to things like suicide, violence against others. You can become extremely depressed, or you can experience things that science could not possibly explain within its current understanding of the cosmos. So, if you're going to practice Tantra, if you're going to practice yoga with the goal of accessing the third eye, you need to be prepared for all of the potential outcomes. Don't just listen to a popular guru like Nityananda, who obsesses with the concept of opening the third eye as the ultimate pathway to enlightenment. Nityananda, by the way, is another individual who is rooted in the ajna. You can see this if you begin to practice Viagra Yoga and you learn how to assess consciousness through experience. You can open those pranic channels, and then you are able to identify with absolute confidence the consciousness of individuals, works of art, things within nature. Nityananda is rooted in the ajna, so he has a bias towards this state of consciousness, and that is why he is obsessed with teaching all of his followers how to access the third eye. Now, he doesn't know what kind of damage he's doing because he exists very comfortably within that state. But if you tell someone who is rooted in, let's say, the Muladhara or the Svadhisthana to access the third eye without the proper training, they are going to have a major shock to their system. And this does not equal enlightenment, okay? The concept of enlightenment is ridiculous anyway, and most people can't even describe what it is. What he's really referring to is transcendence. And the transcendent point within our present age does not exist at the third eye. It exists at the Sahasrara. Now that doesn't mean that everyone rooted in the Sahasrara has achieved transcendence. But on a formal right-hand path yoga practice, you can access the Sahasrara and achieve ego death or transcendence. And from that point, you can advance to the left-hand path. The third eye is just one point on the right-hand path to reach and then transcend as you advance towards the monistic point where you can reach God consciousness. This is what they are trying to speak about when they touch upon the concept of enlightenment. But of course they never reach that point because they are trapped in these biases towards concepts like the beauty and tranquility of the third eye.